By one man who knows one of the candidates very well, Nigel Farage, in just one moment, who can give us a taste of the atmosphere in Mar-a-Lago, where he's the only British MP attending Donald Trump's election night party. Kemi Badenoch has released her full shadow cabinet with a few surprises. We'll reveal who's in and who's out of the Tory front bench. Of the 25 appointments, as many as 20 of them backed Kemi Badenoch. That means 80% of the positions, 4 in 5, have gone to her supporters. Is this the right way to go about uniting the fractured Conservative Party? And a new study has suggested that the cost of the living crisis has fuelled a rise in elderly patients going to hospital with hot water bottle burns in the decade leading up to February last year. But what will the impact will you see following the winter fuel cut under the Labour government? And today, I spotted this Christmas tree being put up in central London. I wanted to ask you this question. Do you think it's too soon to start marking the festive season? Let me know what you think. Email farage@gbnews.com or tweet or X now, #Farage on GB News. All of that to come, but first the news with Sophia Wensler.
Christopher, thank you. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom. Some breaking news in the last half hour. Israel's Prime Minister has fired his Defence Minister, Yoav Gallant, saying it's down to a crisis of trust between them. Benjamin Netanyahu said in a statement that his trust in Gallant had eroded in recent months. He added that Foreign Minister Israel Katz will replace Gallant. Voting is underway in all states across the US as the country decides their 47th president in what is being described as a historically close race. Donald Trump has arrived to vote in Palm Beach near his home alongside his wife Melania. The former president spoke to media saying, "I hear we're doing very well."
I feel very confident. I have felt, we went in with a very big lead today, and it looks like Republicans have shown up in force. I don't have to tell them that there'll be no violence. Of course there'll be no violence. My supporters are not violent people. I don't have to tell them that. And I certainly don't want any violence, but I certainly don't have to tell. These are great people. These are people that believe in no violence.
And Republican vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance has also cast his vote. Speaking outside the polling station, Trump's running mate said, "We do expect to win." Meanwhile, Joe Biden has called on voters to make history by electing Kamala Harris as his successor as he prepared for a quiet election day at the White House. The first result has come in from the small town of Dixville Notch in New Hampshire, where Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have tied with 3 votes each. And back at home now, Kemi Badenoch has held her first shadow cabinet meeting today, saying she will win back the trust of the public with a team effort as she released her full shadow cabinet this morning. Chris Philp has been announced as Shadow Home Secretary, while Jesse Norman has been appointed Shadow Leader of the House. Notably, there is no role for Tom Tugendhat, who was a contender in the leadership race. Yesterday, Badenoch's former rival, Robert Jenrick, accepted the role of Shadow Justice Secretary, while the former Work and Pension Secretary, Mel Stride, is the new Shadow Chancellor. And former Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has been appointed Shadow Foreign Secretary. In other news, the Queen is unwell with a chest infection and has had to withdraw from her engagements this week. That's according to Buckingham Palace. Sir Keir Starmer has posted on X saying, "On behalf of the whole country, I wish Her Majesty the Queen a speedy recovery." The Duchess of Gloucester has stepped in on the Queen's behalf to attend the annual opening of the Field of Remembrance at Westminster Abbey on Thursday. And a proposed ban on vaping and smoking in pub gardens will not go ahead. That's according to the Health Secretary. Wes Streeting says Labour wants to take tougher action to better protect the public, NHS and the economy from the harms of smoking. A ban may be imposed in playgrounds and outside schools. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Now, polls open as America votes for the next president. Will it be Donald Trump or Kamala Harris? Both candidates made their final pitches in the crucial swing state of Pennsylvania. New poll data shows Kamala Harris is leading Donald Trump by 4%, with the gender pay gap narrowing as women are fueling Kamala Harris's late poll surge. But turnout for registered Republicans has been higher than registered Democrats in early voting in a majority of states so far. In Pennsylvania, arguably the most consequential of the swing states, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage received a special shout-out from Donald Trump at his election rally.
You have a man from Europe, I don't know if he's here, I saw him backstage. What he did was, and what he is doing is sort of what we did a few years ago. He's doing a great job. He's always been my friend for some reason. He liked me, I liked him. And he's shaking it up pretty good over there. He was the big winner of the last election in the UK, and he's a very spectacular man, very highly respected, Nigel Farage. He's a little bit of a rebel, but that's good. You know, that's good. Don't change, Nigel.
And don't change, Nigel. Well, joining me down the line from the US is the man himself, Nigel Farage. Welcome to your show, Nigel. Good to see you there. What did you make of what's the atmosphere like there in Florida? Are you in Florida now?
I'm in Florida now. I was in Pennsylvania yesterday and last night. Came back this morning. Went to a couple of polling stations at 7 o'clock on the outskirts of Scranton, which of course is where Joe Biden comes from. I would say this, that in Pennsylvania, absolutely key swing state, 19 electoral college votes, which matter a lot. Trump won it narrowly in 16, Biden won it in 20. It's seen as the absolute pivotal state of all. One thing that was said to me by people, and we're living, you know, we were there on the very, very middle class, detached houses, sort of small town America type area, was that there were a lot more Trump signs on lawns than there were this time than in 2020 or 2016, which kind of means people are less afraid to show their support for Trump. I just think, with all the reports I'm getting at the moment of really big turnouts happening, especially in the rural parts of America, on this course, he's going to win and win quite comfortably.
OK, how was the man when you met him? He said on stage there you'd spoken to him backstage. What did he say to you?
Well, we chatted about the polls, we chatted about the early voting. About a third of the votes for the whole election were in by yesterday and had been counted, believe it or not, or estimated already. I tell you what, for somebody of 78 years old, who was doing 4 big rallies yesterday, who's been working at a pace that's almost unbelievable, he just looked remarkably well, very, very relaxed indeed. I mean, the guy is a physical phenomenon. He really is. No, yeah. He's feeling good. He's feeling bullish. He believes he's going to win.
You weren't called up on stage this time like in previous campaigns. Is that for a reason?
No, I wasn't. And I think that the row over the Labour Party trying to send 100 operatives over here to campaign for Labour was perhaps a factor in that. Even though, of course, I'm not here, you know, as a representative of any political party. I'm here because I'm a friend of his. But that was perhaps a reason why better that I'm a bit lower profile this time.
Can you explain the teal baseball cap? It looks like it's in the colours of your party, Reform UK, the MAGA cap you wore.
So what we did, we reached out to the manufacturers of the MAGA caps and asked for a small sample size done in the Reform colours. So it was rather fun to wear that to the rally. And by the way, Donald thought it was terrific. Loved the hat. Incredible.
If he loses, though, Nigel Farage, there's big concern both sides of the Atlantic. Will he walk away? I think you said in an interview today with The Telegraph you think he should accept the result either way.
No, I said, and read the words, I said if he loses decisively, he should go and play golf. And if he loses decisively, he will play golf. He, in fact, voted here in Palm Beach about 2 hours ago, and he was very clear outside the station to the cameras that were there that if Kamala wins in a fair contest, he will accept it. But look, I don't believe that's going to happen. I think the betting markets are right, and indeed the odds around Trump have tightened today. I think he's going to win. I just don't see how Kamala wins from here unless there is a massive turnout in all the big urban centres around America. All the indications from early voting show that Trump will win the number of votes he needs in the Electoral College.
And just if I can bring you back to UK news today, Nigel Farage, we've heard from Kemi Badenoch. She's appointed her new team. Your old pal, Priti Patel, is the Shadow Foreign Secretary. Are you worried? Are you quaking in your boots about this reformed Tory party and whether it might take back support at the next election?
I think Priti Patel is almost the only person that Kemi Badenoch has appointed that anybody has actually ever heard of. I mean, go through the list of the rest, they're complete unknowns. All the big beasts are choosing to sit it out on the back benches. Looking at the makeup of the shadow cabinet, I think the sort of Remainers and centrists overall have the balance of power. And I think what Kemi Badenoch's leadership represents is continuity. She is the continuity candidate from all that came over the course of the last 14 years. And I can tell you that over the last 3 days, the numbers paying their £25 or more to join Reform has gone up the most since our conference that we had a few weeks ago in Birmingham. So people are coming to us, conversations are happening with councillors all over the country. I think many people realise that Genrick losing means the argument about leaving the European Court of Human Rights is now dead. It's now over. The party is not serious about dealing with illegal immigration into this country with some of the, frankly, awful people, terrible people that we're allowing in, including a man who came in the other day that's openly threatened to kill me. No, I think, to be honest with you, I think if Genrick had won, it might have been more difficult. That isn't the case.
And just finally, Nigel Farage, there is one battle you have won over this side of the Atlantic. The government's dropped plans to ban smoking in pub gardens. I know this was an issue you felt very personally and acutely. Are you relieved that you can have a fag and not face a fine?
Well, I'm relieved, Chris. I'm not relieved for myself. I'm relieved for all those pubs. You know, when they have their 6 o'clock early evening people coming in for a couple of pints, many of them say up to half of those that come in go outside to a shelter or a garden and have a quick cigar or whatever it may be. And it would have been devastating on an industry that has suffered already absolutely horribly. So in the end, I think the Treasury have said to the government, don't do this. It'll end up costing too much money and closing too many businesses. And think about those pubs right now. Maybe a penny off a pint, but of course, for the publican, they've got to pay increased wages in terms of minimum wage, massively increased national insurance, and all very worried what their business rates may be next year. So this is a victory for common sense. OK. This is Nigel Farage. Thank you for joining us tonight from Florida. Thank you. Joining me now is Raj Goyal, Kamala Harris's personal friend and a former Kansas State representative. Nigel, welcome. Raj, welcome to Nigel Farage's show. Did you hear what Nigel Farage had to say there? Do you agree with him that it's going to be a clear win for Donald Trump? It didn't seem very big at all. Can't quite hear what Raj is saying there. Well, we'll get back to Raj as soon as we can.
Okay. All right.
Raj, can you hear me now in New York? That's all good. We can hear you now. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. We had a problem there with the sound. I'm not sure if you heard what Nigel Farage had to say. He's a cheerleader for Donald Trump. He's calling it for Trump already. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think wishful thinking there for Nigel. And last time I checked, he wasn't exactly up to speed on the latest precinct counts over here in America. I know he likes to come and hang out over here. I did read that Telegraph story, actually, even before I knew I was coming on your show. And I have to say, the major news that Nigel has broken, which would be news here in America, is that if he really has Donald Trump on the record saying that he'll accept the results of the election, color us all a little bit doubtful, because Donald Trump has continued to lie about what happened in the 2020 election, no matter what our policy differences are, here across the pond. His behavior in 2020, not just January 6th, but denying the basic democratic processes, is really one of the most dangerous things that we've seen in America. So if Nigel got his friend Donald to accept the results of the election, I'm happy for it, because regardless of who wins, if the ballots are counted accurately and fairly, I'll respect the process.
I think that's important to everybody. He did say if it's a clear win for Kamala Harris, which raises concerns if it's a narrow win.
Well, we call that a head, in New York. So that's why it wasn't exactly decisive from my ears. But as far as his prediction goes, I think he raises a fair point that there are more Trump yard signs. So in 2016, there was really kind of this concept of the shy Trump voter. The reason why I'm confident in Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and the fact that I think they're going to win tonight is we're sort of got the Trump phenomenon baked in. And to be honest, we're tired of it. I'm not a Trump supporter, but this country is just tired of the old shake and bake.
Is he?
Yeah.
Is he looking old, Trump? I mean, he looks young next to Biden. Now Biden's off the stage. He looks old next to your candidate.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's so much about that. And I think I respect the fact that he's 78 and he's out there campaigning. He's doing 3-hour interviews. And so I don't think it's so much about someone's personal age. I think it's the age of his ideas. And so what Donald Trump is doing is he wants to tariff everything. He's made tariff into a verb. And so, Kamala Harris believes in targeted tariffs. He just wants to carpet bomb tariffs. And it's going to be a tax increase for the voters of Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. And that's why these swing states, I think we're going to do very well at. And so really what's happening, I think, in the electorate is they're looking at this Trump phenomenon, which, let's be honest, is a phenomenon, but it's a tired phenomenon. We've seen it before. We fired him in 2020. I think we're going to fire him again in 2024 and tonight with the election results, because we don't want to go backwards. And Kamala Harris is focused like a laser beam on growing this economy from the middle class out. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is out there hawking a crypto scam coin that his family owns. It's not transferable. He's got a meme stock that's worth $6 billion of market cap, even though it's only got a few $1 million of revenue. It's just a lot of smoke and mirrors. And, he's a great campaigner. I'll give him that. But I don't think his vision or his ideas for this country is what this country's buying right now. We want somebody who's going to actually protect this economy and grow us into the future.
Well, Raj Goyal, we'll find out soon enough. Thank you for joining us live from New York. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much, sir. Now, thank you. Now, back to the UK. That was...
Kemi Badenoch, how can you win in 2028? How can you win, Kemi Badenoch? What's your message for Keir Starmer?
That was me getting questions at Kemi Badenoch yesterday, leaving Conservative Party HQ. Today she announced her front bench team, but is it more shallow than shadow cabinet? And the government is set to make it unlawful to smoke outside of schools and hospitals in England. We have some good news for Farage, as you heard there, and pubs. Stay tuned.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Oedipus is back in the theatre, as Stefan Kyriazis can tell me. Stefan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
A good Oedipus or a bad one?
It's a great one. It's divided the critics a little bit. So some would prefer more kind of truth to the original text, perhaps a little bit more sense of the kind of epic Greek tragedy. I mean, this is Sophocles. It's 2,500 years old, and it's still one of the best, literally, no pun, the mother of all tragedies. It's just absolutely staggering. You like that?
I did. Where and with whom?
So this one is on at the Wyndham Theatre until January the 4th. The exciting thing is Mark Strong as Oedipus, Leslie Manville as his wife, Jocasta, and it's been reframed, you'll see from the pictures, as a modern political thriller. So he is waiting for election results, general election results, you will remember. There's a clock ticking down in the background. They're at Campaign HQ. They're waiting for it to click down to zero, we increasingly know that when it hits zero, terrible truths are coming. So it's operating on two levels. He's obsessed with the truth. He says very famously, I am me. He's so proud of his sense of who he is. And of course, that's all going to be horrendously ripped away. Mark Strong is wonderful. And then when we get to the very end and the horrific final reveal, I forgot. I was so gripped in the political thriller and everything else, I actually swore under my breath in the theatre, Michael, because I just had been so engrossed, and they play very well at other mysteries going on and a family drama, that when my penny dropped, I literally was devastated, and they do it. Even the critics that haven't loved this reframing admit, the two of them, and especially at the end, it's searingly agonising. It's glorious.
2,500 years later,
yeah,
it's still absolutely visceral.
Yeah, absolutely.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. Now, has the government completely ruled out banning smoking in pub gardens? Even though Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, confirmed yesterday that the proposed ban has been scrapped, I'm not entirely convinced. Let's have a listen to what Wes Streeting told journalists this morning at GB News, talking about the new tobacco and vapes bill.
And based on the evidence on the upside risks and the arguments on the downside risks, we've chosen not to proceed with the outdoor hospitality proposal at this time.
At this time is a very loaded statement there from Wes Streeting. I found that quite interesting. Joining me now is Kate Nichols, the CEO of UK Hospitality, and my panel are the Tory MP and former Tory leader, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, and the journalist and political commentator JJ Anisiobai. To you first, Kate Nichols, did you hear that at this time, and is that worrying you about the issue? This ban of smoking in public gardens hasn't quite gone away yet.
Well, the bill comes forward and it's got enabling powers. So it does give a power to ministers to consult in this area going forward. The Health Secretary's been very clear, and we've had very encouraging dialogue with him that he's going to exclude hospitality areas, pub gardens, restaurant terraces, from that consultation. But it does give powers going forward for somebody else to change their mind and look at it again. So we do need to get reassurances as we go through the debate to make sure that that is categorically ruled out, because as the Health Secretary rightly says, this has an impact on livelihoods, jobs, growth and investment.
Because that leak to the Sun newspaper, I think, meant they almost had the consultation before it came out, didn't they? And the reaction there was quite strong.
Well, I think that leak preempted them having, for what they should have done first, having dialogue with the industry to discuss in detail what it would mean in practice and what the impact would be. So we've welcomed the fact that they've talked to us, they've discussed with us and looked at the economic impact assessment again. But yes, we will have consultation at the end of this process. When the bill's completed its passage, there's consultation on which areas will be covered, not just by outdoor smoking, but indoor vaping. We want to get categoric assurances that hospitality is firmly excluded.
And the rest of what they're announcing here, they want to ban vaping indoors, smoking around, school gates and playgrounds. That's understandable. But how are you worried about the issue of vaping? That's what people do. Essentially, it's steam, I think, when you emit. It's not smoke, so it won't cause health problems for workers. Is that right?
It doesn't cause health problems. There isn't any passive smoking issue that there was with indoor smoking. The industry itself, when indoor smoking was banned, introduced their own codes of practice around vaping, around food service and indoor areas. That seemed to be relaxing in certain areas, so it's helpful to have that clarification. But put simply, the industry is already regulating itself in this this area. There's no need for further regulation.
Serene Duncan-Smith, of course, a senior Tory MP. You can't really complain about this because this policy was put forward by your former leader, Rishi Sunak.
Yeah, well, I can still complain about it. I wasn't leader at the time. I think that the pub garden thing I said at the time was utter nonsense because it's out in the open air. People will choose to be there or they won't be there. And I think fiddling and meddling with that was a nonsense. With regards to vaping, as I understand, there are some vapes that don't emit what is very clear levels of steam, and I've seen people using those. They're little ones and they kind of suck on them, and they're not apparently giving out huge steam. Some others that just puff it away to make the person feel better as though they're really smoking, I'm sure. But I think when you get into the banning things, there has to be some pretty clear evidence that there is harm, and that is what the public think. So public might go, I don't want this stuff done in pubs, you know, all that sort of stuff. But we don't really know what the view of the public is. So my view is I would tread carefully if I was the government.
Yes.
You can get into a bad habit of banning everything if you like, but at the end of it all, the public are the ones that pay the taxes and they're the ones that vote for us, and I think governments should just take account of what they think first.
Janice Obi, I mean, is this ban even enforceable? They're going to say that if you're under 15, you can never buy cigarettes in an off-licence or a corner shop. Is that possible?
No, you'll just get a fake license, a fake ID or something, you know, as we did with alcohol when I was a kid. But regards vaping...
Oh, that's an
regards vaping, I think they have to ban it. I think it should be banned in pubs and restaurants because... As Ian Duncan-Smith says, whether you have a small one that doesn't emit any smoke or whether you have one that does lots of smoke, I don't particularly want to be sat at my table and be smelling blueberry vape coming through the air. So I think it would be sensible to ban it completely. And also the proposal that they're suggesting we would ban it from outside hospitals, playgrounds. I think that makes sense. Protects the kids and protects vulnerable adults as well.
Yeah, moving on to the shadow cabinet, Ian Duncan-Smith announced today. You're chuckling away. You're a big Kemi Badenoch backer, aren't you? I mean,
I supported her. I think she's the right person.
Pleased with the makeup?
Really.
It's quite a shallow cabinet to me. Not the big beasts like yourselves aren't in it.
Well, I went there to address them today, so there's a start.
Did you?
Yes.
What do you say to them?
Just what opposition is like. You've got to remember, we're a whole generation away from opposition now, and so most of the MPs that are in the cabinet have never, in fact, all of them have never experienced opposition. I went through that 13 years of Labour government under Tony Blair.
You did.
So I do know what being an opposition is like, and it's a very hard, difficult task because you've got none of the resources government has, but at the same time, you've got to hold them to account. And I was just really chatting about that to them to say there are plenty of devices you can use. And also, essentially, although we are in opposition, this is not the Blair government that I was opposed to. They started on 44% and went upwards afterwards, and they were running along at some 50% plus for some years after they got elected. This government only started at 33% in the poll, which is pretty low. In fact, I think it's the lowest ever, and got this enormous result because of the way that ex-Tory voters and everything else deserted us. And down, they've gone to what is now level with us at 27%. So I have to say, it's a slightly different target now.
I think it's wonderful that Kemi Badenoch has brought in so many new MPs, so to speak. But I think she's missing a trick by leaving out big beasts like IDS here. Perhaps you wouldn't do it again, but I think having 2 or 3
James Cleverly, Jeremy Hunt on the back benches.
Exactly. There's talent there with experience. Having at least 2 or 3 of them around, I think, would be very helpful.
Kate Nichols, looking at that team there is more business experience. There is nothing in the cabinet I can think of. We have got Andrew Griffiths as your new business secretary or shadow business secretary. Are you encouraged by the shape of this team, or is it a bit lightweight for you?
No, it's very helpful to have people who've got experience of running businesses and different types of businesses. Democracy needs a really strong, robust opposition, and we need that in the parliamentary debates and discussions. As these bills come forward, they need to be scrutinised carefully.
Yes.
They need people who are forensic, who've got that practical experience to be able to put the challenges to the government to make sure we get better legislation.
So when you addressed the shadow cabinet today, what was the key fact you left them with, Ian Duncan-Smith?
That opposition is tough. And it's what you make of it. I called it the war of the flea, which is you're dealing with this Leviathan on the other side, has all the resources, all the money, all the civil service. You have very little, but what you do have is knowing to strike when you're least expected to, and to get them into difficulty, to split the Labour Party at some point. These are all real ways in which...
It's guerrilla warfare.
Well, for the opposition, it
Sounds
is.
like it.
It is essentially a form of that, because that's what you want. That's what the public want. They want to know that you're on the front foot and holding them to account, no matter what. So they don't get away with some of these flip decisions, like banning this and banning that, or raising taxes. You're going to be on the side of those who have to pick up the bill.
JJ Anciobi, Ian Duncan-Smith said in the past that Kemi Badenoch can develop into someone who could be a good PM, which is, being optimistic about it, because you've got to work out some facts. Do you think she can challenge properly Keir Starmer at the next election?
I don't think she'll be leader of the Tory party at the next election. I really don't. I think it would have been better for her if Gemma could win this. 2-3 years down the line, there's more arguments and infighting with the Tories, and then Kemi comes in to steer the ship to victory. I don't think she's going to be in charge, unfortunately.
I've got to put that to Ian Duncan-Smith. Will she fight the next election, yes or no?
I've been around a bit. I've seen lots of leaders of the opposition. I've seen the good ones that come through. I've seen the difficult times when you've got somebody like Blair and France. The truth is, you don't pick a leader of the opposition as a prime minister. You pick them as a leader of the opposition. They develop... Look at Mrs Thatcher. When she was picked, most of the media, I recall, sadly I'm old enough to remember this, they all said, Tories have taken a turn for the worse, she's not electable. 3 years later, she wins the general election. Why? Because she developed, she grew, she became that person that nobody could take their eyes off. I think Kemi has that within her. She's strong and aggressive, and I think she'll develop the judgment in terms of these things which matter, and that's what I want. I don't want a prime minister now, I want a leader of the opposition.
Well, there we go. Well, Sir Ian, JJ and, of course, Kate, thank you for joining us tonight on The Farage. Coming up next is the cost of living crisis and the axe to winter fuel allowance, sending hundreds of pensioners to hospital.
Evening. Thanks for joining me for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Mild, misty and murky sums up the weather tomorrow and indeed for the overnight period. High pressure is edging away, but it's still controlling the weather, not just for us, but across most of Europe. In fact, a weak weather front is trying to mix things up a little. That will introduce more cloud and some patchy rain across the far northwest of Scotland. The breeze picking up here as well during this evening. But elsewhere, the winds are pretty light. There's a lot of cloud around. Could be some fog patches, particularly on higher routes, but even at lower levels across parts of the southeast of England, where temperatures will dip down to single figures. Maybe not far off freezing through some parts of northeast Scotland. Here to start Wednesday, but also here we'll have some brighter skies. Elsewhere, well, brightness hard to find. It's a glum start to Wednesday. Thick cloud, mist, drizzle, murky and misty. Some damp conditions over southwest Scotland, particularly over the hills here. But for many, it'll be a dry start. And although it'll be a bit colder in northeast Scotland, we should also see some sunny spells coming through here. A little bit of rain early on across the far north and northwest of Scotland. So that should tend to edge away. We'll keep some thicker cloud around western coast and hills, so a little bit of drizzle. But for most, it'll just be dry and cloudy. Bit more optimistic for some breaks in the cloud tomorrow. North Wales, again, parts of northern England too, and again, northern Scotland actually seeing some sunny spells here with a bit of sun, 16, maybe 17 or even 18 Celsius. Even where it's cloudy, temperatures a bit higher than today, quite mild really, 13 or 14. But I say overall, it is fairly great, as it will be again on Thursday. The breeze getting more noticeable through tomorrow and in the west on Thursday. Further east, mostly it's light winds, so again, just a lot of cloud. Most places dry and temperatures a touch above average. Where we see some sunshine there, those temperatures climbing into the mid-teens. Bye for now.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Court cases.
A presidential dropout.
Assassination attempts.
This has been a US election like no other.
And if the polls are correct, it's on a knife edge.
Stay up with us as the drama unfolds and America decides their next president.
We'll discuss what it means for them, for the world, and for our special relationship. America Decides, tonight from 11.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Christopher Hope. Now, earlier I mentioned that I'd spotted this Christmas tree being put up in central London. I want to ask you this question. Do you think it's too soon to be marking the festive season? And you've been sending in your thoughts. Robert says, "Dear sir," well, thank you for being so polite, Robert. "It's far too early to be putting up the Christmas tree at Trafalgar Square. The next thing will be January sales in December." Yeah, that happens too. "Stay traditional." Liesel says, "Good evening, Christopher. Christmas decorations, lights and trees should not go up before Remembrance Sunday and or Armistice Day. Even better, not until the beginning of Advent." I think I agree with Liesel, but Susan says, "Yes, it's absolutely too soon to be putting up Christmas decorations, a sign of the times where people have no self-control and can't wait for anything. Encouraged by the retail sector who cannot wait to sell you their tat." Well, blimey, that's got you going tonight. Thank you for all your messages. Keep sending them in. Now, welcome back to Farage with me, Christopher Hope. New figures reveal a 70% rise in the number of pensioners hospitalised as a result of burns from hot water bottles. This is linked to the cost of living crisis and soaring energy bills. In the past 10 years, these incidences have cost the NHS more than £12 million. But this could worsen now the government has scrapped the winter fuel allowance. Joining me now here at the studio in Westminster is my panel of Tory MP and former leader Sir Ian Duncan-Smith and the journalist and political commentator JJ Anisiobi. JJ, do you have a hot water bottle at home?
I do.
Has it ever burst?
It hasn't. I'm told they have an expiry date. That's something I never knew before. They have an expiry date, yeah. Apparently every 2 to 3 years you should change it because the rubber
perishes.
Yeah, and will explode or melt in the bed, which can cause burns. But when I was a kid, we didn't have electric blankets. We had a hot water bottle. I shared bed with my sister until I was 8 years old, and we had one hot water bottle between us. We never got burned. No. So I'm confused, unless these hot water bottles are just perishing, I'm confused whether these pensioners perhaps aren't tightening them properly.
But you can overfill them in, Duncan-Smith. I mean, you must have one at home for you and your wife.
We don't. I do recall, as being a child, you would create the pressure. When you filled it, you would squeeze out the air. And then do the screw.
Crucial
so when you let it, the water can slip around, it doesn't puff up the water because of the vacuum there. And no, we use wheat bags. Wheat bags. They don't use wheat bags.
Yeah.
So wheat bags are very simple. You just pop it into the microwave. You heat it up for 4 minutes. It holds its heat much longer than a hot water bottle.
Yeah. Right.
And you can rearrange them around your legs or whatever you want to do. My wife swears by them. I often swear at them. But the reality is wheat bags are really the best way of doing it. And they're natural. They absorb the energy and then they give off the energy over a long period of time. Some hours, actually, I think.
These figures, though, do mask a serious problem, which is the withdrawal of the winter fuel payment, don't they, JJ? I mean, and the question now is, will we see an increase in people being scalded by hot water bottles as more people buy them to keep warm this winter?
Absolutely. But I think it's being overinflated a little bit. I think the number is less than 500 people in the last year have been scalded by hot water bottles. So it's not...
It's more than one a day.
It's more than one a day, but it's not as much as people dying from smoking cigarettes, for example. You know? So I don't think it's as big an issue, but certainly... and I feel like I'm banging a drum saying this, I'm completely against the Labour government. As a Labour supporter myself, I'm completely against them pledging £3 billion a year to Ukraine and saying, but we can't afford to give money to look after our pensioners. I'm completely against the Labour government saying we're going to pledge £22 billion to net zero issues, but they're not going to give a couple of billion to our pensioners.
Yes.
And if one pensioner ends up burning themselves because they can't afford to heat their home, that is on our Labour government.
For you for asking this, Ian Duncan-Smith, did you ever get the winter fuel payment? Are you old enough for one?
I'm now past my pensionable age. It just comes automatically.
Have you had it in
be cut now, but
it's going. Have you had it in previous years? Do you felt you should be having it?
Well, not only just recently sort of past the pensionable age, but that's by the by. The reality is that I was Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, and we were asked by the Treasury to look at this, and we did a deep dive on whether or not they could manipulate this process, and the answer was, I came back and said no. First of all, it's clunky. Secondly, you will hurt some of the poorest. So why you keep it on the same level as the pension? It's because you ensure that it gets to those who need it most. Yes, it costs you a bit to do that, but it's the most efficient way of targeting those rather than trying to set means tests. And then the idea that you could get people onto pensioner credit, I looked at that again, and governments have tried again and again to do this. And there's a reason why lots of people don't claim pension credit. It's because they don't want the taxman in their lives checking everything they do and the worry of form filling, and it's pages and
forms
pages.
are long, aren't they?
Huge forms. And
Were they your forms then?
No, this was all Gordon Brown.
Okay.
So what we wanted to do is I said, look, there is no real trade-off here. Pensioner credit, yes, you of course want more of the people that can do it, but that's not going to happen overnight, and that's something you have to do slowly, but they need persuading, and a lot of them don't want to do it.
The scale of the tax rises last week, JJ, though, I mean, and the money they're saving by this is a fraction, really, of the 40 billion they're raising. Is it worth the fight? I mean, we are seeing our postbag at GB News and listeners and viewers writing in really concerned about this. It has damaged them, hasn't it?
Completely damaged them. And again, speaking as a Labour supporter, this is not the Labour government that I voted for. They seem to be doing all kinds of decisions now that they were quiet about previously and had no intention of doing.
What do you make of that, then? I mean, the issue of trust was one that's damaged the Tory party, and now Labour appears to risk that by the way it's behaving in power.
Well, as I said about Kemi Badenoch, I don't think she'll be in charge at the next election.
But on Labour?
On Labour, I don't think Keir Starmer will be either. I think he has already run out of all of the credibility that he had to begin with. Him going in and saying, we're Labour, we're going to be even whiter than white than the Tories were, we're going to do everything by the book, complete transparency. It's been the complete opposite. It's the complete opposite.
I'm going to ask you, Duncan Smith, JJ says that Keir Starmer won't fight the next election. He will be nearly a pensioner at the election against a much younger Tory candidate if Kemi Badenoch is there. Will Keir Starmer fight the next election?
Well, I'm not in the Labour Party, I can't answer that, but I do know that he immediately did some, I thought, quite stupid things. So all those frontbenchers during opposition who work their backsides off for no pay, no recognition, nothing else, they get into government and their one hope is I could be a minister, you know, I could do some things.
Emily Thornberry being a case in point.
And he dumps them. And they've all gone to the back benches. Now, that's a very unhappy crew of people who gave their all during opposition, now don't get the benefits of being a minister. And then to watch, invidiously, people who haven't even sat in the House of Commons going on the front bench, never heard of before, by the way, who are really struggling to find their way in some cases. And they're sitting in the back thinking, what the hell was all that for? Not happy bunnies at all. And there are others who didn't like him in the first place. So I think it will build as a reservoir. And if this winter fuel payment decision, I have to tell you, the Labour friends that I've got, they are up in arms about it. They have been bombarded with emails. Remember, you don't just take away the winter fuel payment from the pensioners. Their children fight for them, and their grandchildren fight for them. You've done 3 generations of a whack, which is what's going on.
All for 300 quid. Ian Duncan Smith and JJ Ansover, thank you for joining us again tonight on Farage. Coming up next, is the poppy becoming a show of performative patriotism? Try to say that after a pint.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Tell us about this film, because it's obviously come from your own experiences.
We wanted to create something for the entertainment industry that wasn't just another kind of dull documentary. I mean, some of them are brilliant, they're very informative, but you kind of leave a bit bewildered and a little bit kind of flat. So we thought, I've got a passion for writing and you've obviously got an unbounded knowledge on the subject. Why don't we create a film with a kind of satirical look on eating disorders?
So this came it's been made 20 years after your own...
It is 20 years.
20 years,
practically to the day.
So Samantha, you suffered with OCD and an eating disorder as well?
Yes.
And that's when your mum became a counsellor, is that right?
A little bit later on, I think we spent a bit of time in the system and I realised that it wasn't working for us. So I took it on myself to learn as much as I could about the subject.
I call it a tragedy, probably the wrong word, but
No, it is a tragedy because mental ill health and eating disorders destroy the lives of not only the sufferers but their families as well.
But you've turned that into something so positive and so
It's
inspiring.
amazing, really, that 20 years ago our story was just beginning, and 20 years on, we've done what we've done. But I have to say that very little has changed in the system.
I've heard that.
And I think that's what we're passionate about.
Yeah, so...
And that was why we wanted to... I mean, I work with families every day and I see the destruction that eating disorders and other mental illnesses not just bring to the sufferer, but the whole family.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really passions me, because obviously 20 years ago we were there. And I just feel that so much more needs to be done. And I think with eating disorders, there is still a lot of misunderstanding around the subject.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Christopher Hope. I'm wearing my poppy. Are you at home? Do you feel that the meaning of the poppy is being a bit lost? Is it becoming a show of performative patriotism? I only ask because Philippa Rawlinson, whose job title is the Director of Remembrance at the Royal British Legion, says this: if anyone doesn't want to wear a poppy, we're on their side. It has to be a personal choice or it loses its meaning. What do our panel think? Joining me now is my panel of the Tory MP and former Tory leader, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, and the journalist and political commentator, JJ Anisiobi. Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, you're wearing your poppy. Is there a feeling of you're forced to wear it if you're in public life?
Well, first of all, we used to have the situation where you didn't put a poppy on until after November had begun, from the 1st of November, which is absolutely correct. And it came off pretty much straight after the 11th, or Remembrance Sunday, whichever came last.
Yeah, Armistice Day, yeah.
And you wouldn't wear it then for days afterwards, and I often see lots of people wearing it. Secondly, it is wholly up to people. Yeah. I've always worn it. I was an ex-soldier. I want to show respect for those who've gone before me and died. And I'm glad in a way that people may slightly overdo it now. Because I remember when I was a soldier, I wasn't able to wear my uniform in London because of the IRA threat. We'd almost stopped doing Remembrance Sunday. Hardly anybody turned up in those days to the local ones. And then since things like the Iraq War and various others, suddenly people have realised that actually the armed forces are vital for them and it's worth to commemorate them, those who've lost their lives. So I think it's right, but if you don't want to wear a poppy and you have some objection, frankly, it's a free world, it's a free country, and you can do what you like.
JJ Anisiobi, you're keen poppy. You raise money for the poppy appeal.
Yeah, I stand in the train stations in London and sell them. I think everyone who's British should wear the poppy.
I think on the screen now, that's you.
Yeah, that's me with my...
raising some money there.
Autumn latte. But yeah, I think everyone should wear them. I think there's the dignity that we used to have of celebrating the poppy in terms of raising money has changed as society has changed. I don't have an issue with there being a white poppy for pacifists or a purely black poppy, or, I mean, I saw a couple of weeks ago...
A black poppy?
Yeah, black poppy for some of the soldiers from the
Commonwealth.
The Commonwealth, exactly.
Or the Empire at the time, who died.
Exactly. I don't mind if there's the rainbow one I've seen now has been released as well. As long as it raises more money for the charity, that for me is what matters most. Because, and if I'm honest, if our governments were doing more for our veterans, this charity wouldn't be as needed, neither would Hope for Heroes.
Correct.
They're stepping up and raising money for soldiers who have put their lives on the line.
Ian Duncan-Smith, briefly on black and white poppies and rainbow poppies, are you in favour?
Well, people can wear whatever they like. I would just remind them that this is not about signifying where you are, where you came from. This is about one simple fact. Yes. That the reason they chose the poppy was after all the dead were buried on the battlefields, above their bodies grew suddenly huge numbers of poppies.
Red poppies.
Exactly right. And the poppy was very clear. That's why it's used. It's not because we pick some target. It's just simply a commemoration to remember those bodies that lie still to this day in many places.
And they're being, the bones are being
and
turned
the
up.
poppies
Even
were
now.
the things that came up, and that was the whole point of remembrance.
That's right. Well, I must bring in Jacob Rees-Mogg, whose show starts shortly. Jacob, would you wear a black, white or rainbow-coloured poppy?
No, I'd only wear a red poppy. I agree exactly with what Ian said, and I'm afraid I like the one with plastic stems. I think these new ones that they've done are rubbish. And they fall to pieces immediately, and they don't look very smart, whereas the proper poppies look smart. I'm afraid I take the leaf off, because when I was a child they didn't have leaves on them, and I can't think why they needed to put a leaf on.
But can't you move on in life and have a leaf?
I don't wish to. I don't wish to move on.
Why are you stuck in the past, Jacob Rees-Mogg?
And I've also sold poppies for the Midsummer Norton and Radstock Rotary outside Tesco's in Poulton in previous years, and I think it's a worthwhile thing to do, and remembrance is important. People gave their lives for an important thing. But I also agree with Ian, people should be free not to wear them, and like Christmas in August, a gentleman doesn't wear a poppy before the 1st of November.
OK. Quite right. J.J. Anisobi's point now is if you encourage people who wouldn't wear a poppy but they'll put money into a collection tin, if it's a black or white one or a rainbow-coloured one, why not allow that to happen to raise more money for the Legion?
I'm not in favour of telling people how to lead their lives. If people wish to wear other poppies, that's a matter for them. But I wouldn't dream of wearing one. I think, as Ian says, it's not about you. It's about the people you're commemorating who lost their lives for our freedom, and I don't therefore think it's necessary to express your own views through a poppy.
Yes. Do you think JJ has got a role, given how far away the First and Second World Wars are now, and soon very few veterans from the Second World War will be alive, let alone the First World War?
No, I think it's imperative that whether it's Remembrance Sunday and as well being taught in schools, it's important that future generations know exactly why we have the freedoms we have and who sacrificed themselves in order for these kids now to be able to say and do whatever they like.
Yeah, Ian Duncan-Smith, do you agree with that? I mean, it's people's lives are being lost, but luckily we're not in any war at the moment, or not ones we know about, in terms of troops being deployed around the world.
We've been in wars for a long, long time, and they're wars I believe my country goes into because they're in the right reasons, but the soldiers, nonetheless, their job is to do what they're told by the government, and we therefore commemorate them because they don't make the choices. It's politicians that make the choices, and they have to go and risk their lives. So I commemorate them, my colleagues, some who never came back from Northern Ireland, I remember dearly. That's what I do.
Of course, but JJ, do you think, though, that it shouldn't really be up to charity to look after veterans? Why isn't the government doing this? I mean, that's the point you raised earlier.
Yeah.
Why on earth do we need a charity to do work which we think our taxes should go towards?
Yeah, I think if we polled the country, people would be mainly in favour of giving more support to our veterans. And it's a crying shame that consecutive governments, whether you're red or whether you're blue, I don't feel they do enough. They do a lot, but I think we can do more. And as Ian Duncan-Smith says, war is old men talking and young men dying. And unfortunately, that's the way it's always been, and that's the way it's going to continue to be. So whatever we can do, whether it's selling poppies, whether it's standing out and remembering them yourself silently, whatever you can do to help raise the awareness and raise money for these charities, the better.
Yeah. Ian Duncan-Smith, you agree? I mean, it's all about basically participating, isn't it, in a Remembrance Act?
It is, and I think that you couldn't do this through taxation or government expenditure. Why? Because it should be a voluntary act of care and remembrance. If you're told that your tax money goes to it, you shuffle off the responsibility to commemorate. It's important that we make the decision to commemorate, and by buying a poppy, you make that decision to commemorate those who have gone before so that you can live your life in free and in peace and with the rights that are established of free speech, and all those things are important, and you make that choice. If you don't make the choice, that's your position. I'm not prepared to buy this, but for those who make the choice, put the poppy on their lapels, it's their choice, their money.
So, Ian Duncan-Smith, thank you. And JJ, as it'll be great to have you on the show tonight. Thank you both for coming in. Coming up soon is State of the Nation with my friend Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg. He's here now, as you know. Jacob, what's on your show?
Well, we're going to be talking, of course, about Donald Trump, because at 9 o'clock, I think, the first exit polls may be coming out, or possibly at 9 or 10. And we're going to be talking about the reversal of Brexit, that Keir Starmer, the Reverend Keir, is talking about getting back into the European arrest warrant and things like that, which we should be really nervous of because that brings back the European
The Reverend Keir, you called him?
I call him the Reverend Keir because he's so pious, he's so holy. he speaks in that vicarish way. so he's the Reverend Starmer.
There we are. The Reverend Starmer is getting the focus of Antigone Smog. Thank you both for being on the panel tonight. It's been great. I'll be back tomorrow night because Nigel Farage is not here. Coming up next, State of the Nation, but first, the weather right now with Alex Deakin.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Thanks for joining me for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Mild, misty and murky sums up the weather tomorrow and indeed for the overnight period. High pressure is edging away, but it's still controlling the weather, not just for us, but across most of Europe, in fact. A weak weather front is trying to mix things up a little. That will introduce more cloud and some patchy rain across the far northwest of Scotland. The breeze picking up here as well during this evening. But elsewhere, the winds are pretty light. There's a lot of cloud around. Could be some fog patches, particularly on higher routes, but even at lower levels across parts of the southeast of England, where temperatures will dip down to single figures. Maybe not far off freezing through some parts of northeast Scotland here to start Wednesday, but also here we'll have some brighter skies. Elsewhere, well, brightness hard to find. It's a glum start to Wednesday. Thick cloud, mist, drizzle, murky and misty. Some damp conditions over southwest Scotland, particularly over the hills here. But for many, it'll be a dry start. And although it'll be a bit colder in northeast Scotland, we should also see some sunny spells coming through here. A little bit of rain early on across the far north and northwest of Scotland. So that should tend to edge away. We'll keep some thicker cloud around western coast and hills, so a little bit of drizzle. But for most, it'll just be dry and cloudy. Bit more optimistic for some breaks in the cloud tomorrow. North Wales, again, parts of northern England too, and again, northern Scotland actually seeing some sunny spells here with a bit of sun, 16, maybe 17 or even 18 Celsius. Even where it's cloudy, temperatures a bit higher than today, quite mild really, 13 or 14. But I say overall, it is fairly great, as it will be again on Thursday. The breeze getting more noticeable through tomorrow and